The House with a Clock in Its Walls. 1955. Louis Barneveld, Owen Vaccaro, is sent to live with his uncle Jonathan, Jack Black, in Michigan, after Louis's parents die in a car crash. Upon arriving at Jonathan's home, Louis meets Jonathan's neighbor and best friend, Florence Zimmerman, Cate Blanchett, with whom he trades playful insults. All Louis has left of his parents is a magic 8-ball that they gave him before the crash. That night, Louis sits in for a poker game with Jonathan and Florence. Through the use of magic, Louis wins each game, although he is not yet aware that magic is involved. He asks Florence how she knows Jonathan, and she states that they met after the war. Later on, Louis tries to sleep that night, only to be kept up by what sounds like a faint ticking noise. Louis starts school and gets picked last for dodgeball, after the kid with a broken ankle. He later meets Tarby Corrigan, Sonny Suljic, who is being friendly with him, just so he can get voted class president. The other kids think Louis is weird for wearing goggles, which he based off his favorite TV hero, Captain Midnight. Tarby finds out that Louis lives in what the other kids call the slaughterhouse, due to the belief that it is haunted. Tarby also mentions to Louis that he should lose the goggles to appear normal, speaking as a friend, leading Louis to believe that they are genuine friends. At night, Louis thinks he is dreaming seeing his mother, Lorenza Izzo. She indicates that Jonathan is hiding something from him, and that the ticking sound he hears is real. Mrs. Barneveld also tells Louis that he must find a book, and then a key. Louis then gets up and goes around the house in the dark. He finds several creepy-looking dolls, and Jonathan is smashing one of them. Louis runs away freaked out and sees the windows and piano, among other things, coming to life. Jonathan is then forced to explain himself and tell Louis the truth about magic being involved in the house, and that Jonathan is a practicing warlock, and that Florence is a witch. He also tells Louis about the house's previous owner, a sinister warlock named Isaac Izard, Kyle MacLachlan. Before Isaac died the previous year, he left a clock in the house, and Jonathan has been trying to find it and discover what it is meant to do. At Louis's request, Jonathan decides to teach him how to be a warlock. He gives him a bunch of books to brush up on. Louis learns that, in order to be a legitimate warlock, he must fight an evil spirit using his own magic. Jonathan lets Louis know that he has only one rule, and that is to never open a cabinet that he has locked. Jonathan looks through an old book with clippings of Isaac when he was a famous illusionist, as well as pictures of him during World War II. We then see a flashback from the previous year where Jonathan and Florence came to Isaac's home, just as he performed the experiment that killed him. Before he died, he told Jonathan, "The beginning and the end. The alpha and the omega. Can you hear the ticking?" Florence then comes in after trying to find the clock, and she asks Jonathan if he told Louis everything about Isaac. Jonathan says no, and that he plans on continuing to lie to the boy. Jonathan and Florence gets Louis ready for his first ever spell. When he reads off the spells from the books, it doesn't work because they tell Louis he needs to use his own brand of magic for it to work. Jonathan demonstrates by playing a saxophone terribly and using it to unlock the magic in his garden for Louis to see. He then tucks Louis into bed and he tells his uncle that he had a great night. Louis then asks Jonathan why he left home. He says he considered himself the black swan of the family, so he left, and he felt that Mrs. Barneveld, his sister, would not have wanted him at her funeral. Louis continues to practice his magic, even at school, which is noticed by a curious girl named Rose Rita Pottinger, Vanessa Ann Williams. Jonathan finds himself growing more attached to the boy, but he and Florence are also growing more concerned over what happens if they don't find the clock soon. The next afternoon, Jonathan looks at an old picture of Isaac and Selena with a gnome statue in it that was missing an arm, but now has one built. Jonathan pulls on the arm, which opens up a secret entrance that leads him into a room where he finds the blueprints for the clock. Tarby wins class president and then stops acting like Louis's friend. Louis tries to invite him over to show him magic to keep him interested, but Tarby opens Jonathan's restricted cabinet. There, Louis spots the book that his mother had mentioned to him, and Tarby takes it out to open the first page that has a spell for necromancy. Louis takes the book back and puts it away, leading Tarby to go home, and says Louis is just a weird kid. Jonathan and Florence look over the blueprints, and they are both stumped on how to decipher it. She notices an omega symbol with a skull, which Isaac mentioned before he died. They also realize it was, in early Christianity, a symbol for Judgment Day. Louis is once again visited by his mother in a dream. He laments that Tarby doesn't see him as a friend, so Mrs. Barneveld suggests that he use a spell to make Tarby want to be his friend. At school, Rose Rita notices Louis wants to get Tarby's attention, so she tells him Tarby's a jerk, and she offers to collect spiders with him, but Lewis brushes her off. He invites Tarby to join him so that they can raise the dead. Later that night, Lewis finds Tarby in the cemetery. They find a tomb, and Lewis starts to read from the spell book. The tomb opens, and Tarby runs away. Unknowingly, Lewis has just resurrected Isaac Izard. Jonathan and Florence realize Isaac is back. They know their magic isn't strong enough to face him just yet, so they start to nail horseshoes to the house to keep Isaac away. In the house, Jonathan sees that the window has formed an unsettling image of 3 graves with skeletons that resemble himself, Florence, and Lewis. The boy tries to confess what he did, but Jonathan and Florence vow to make the one who resurrected Isaac pay. Jonathan sends Lewis to stay with Florence for a few days. In Florence's home, Lewis notices a poster advertising Isaac and Jonathan as a magical duo. Florence shows Lewis a series of flashbacks that showed Isaac and Jonathan performing together until Isaac went MIA during the war. Isaac later returned home, but was suffering from PTSD. He mentioned being in the Black Forest, which is known for harboring dark magic, and Florence thinks Isaac made a deal with a dark warlock there in exchange for the powers he later possessed. He also later married the spiteful and wicked Selena, Renée Elise Goldsberry. Florence then explains how Isaac performed the dark magic ritual to make a key for the clock, which is believed to have been made from Selena's finger bone. When Lewis asks Florence why she can't help stop Isaac, she takes a look at a picture of her deceased husband and daughter, and she states that because of her pain, she hasn't been able to work the same magic that she used to. Lewis tries to warn Tarby about Isaac, but Tarby orders him to keep quiet about being in the cemetery, or he'll break Lewis's arms. Lewis goes back home to find the blueprints so he can help out, but he is attacked by flying books. He gets out as Jonathan and Florence arrive to help him. He tells the two that he can read the blueprints, but he needs Arvaltine. They go to a nearby candy store, where Lewis uses a bunch of chocolate powder to try and decipher the markings on the blueprints. They soon discover that the clock is a doomsday device that will reverse time all the way to the beginning. The 3 return home to find the horseshoes have been pulled off the walls, meaning Isaac was there. They enter the house to find it ransacked. Jonathan and Florence decide to destroy the key, but it won't dissolve in the acid they dip it in. Lewis then confesses to resurrecting Isaac just to impress Tarby, and also because he thought that, if the spell worked, he could see his parents again. Feeling betrayed, Jonathan decides he wants to send Lewis away for disobeying him. Lewis runs away crying, and Florence tells Jonathan that he is being a coward for trying to avoid responsibility for the boy. Lewis runs across the street to get Jonathan's neighbor Mrs. Blanchett, Colleen Camp, to get help. Before Lewis can find Jonathan, Isaac emerges. He then reveals that Mrs. Blanchett is really Selena in disguise, and that she killed the real Mrs. Blanchett, took her place, and that the key was made from her bones. Selena also reveals that she was taking the form of Mrs. Barneveld to persuade Lewis into doing her bidding to bring Isaac back. Isaac captures Lewis, followed by Jonathan and Florence. He explains to them that, because of the horrors he saw in the war, he wanted to completely forget what he saw. He met a demon, Azazel, in the Black Forest, and he granted Isaac the power to make his wish come true, and that the clock will turn time back so that humanity never existed. Isaac uses the creepy dolls and killer pumpkins to send the 3 away. Jonathan apologizes to Lewis for how he talked to him, and they all plan to go back and stop Isaac and Selena. Lewis uses the magic 8-ball to learn that the location of the clock is under the boiler room. Using all their wits and magic, the 3 go back to destroy the pumpkins and dolls to find the clock. Florence gets taken by a mutated snake, leaving Lewis and Jonathan to face the villains on their own. Isaac awaits as the lunar eclipse is setting, which will activate the clock's power. He and Selena are protected from the clock's effects. Lewis and Jonathan try to fight back, but Jonathan is morphed into a weird baby that still has his adult head. The eclipse happens, and people around town start to de-age to children. Lewis consults the magic 8-ball to know what to do, and it says say goodbye, as in Lewis has to let go of his pain from losing his parents to harness his true power. He drops the ball into the clock's gears to slow it down, which makes Isaac and Selena leave their protected post. Using his own magic, Lewis zaps Isaac and Selena, causing them to fall, de-age, and ultimately be erased from existence. Everything goes back to normal. Lewis goes back to school with more confidence. When Tarby and his Goonie friend refuse to pick Lewis for sports, Lewis shows off a little bit of magic by making a basketball bounce off Tarby and his friends' faces to sink it into the net, and soon everyone wants Lewis on their team. He instead hangs out with Rose Rita. Jonathan then picks him up from school, where they go home with Florence, as the three of them are now like a regular family.